I want you to stop and think about Nikola Tesla for a moment. Forget everything you know. The memes, the forgotten genius posts, the Edison versus Tesla debates on the internet. Because here's the problem with the way we talk about Tesla. We've turned him into a symbol, a martyr, an aesthetic. And in doing so, we've completely missed what really happened to him and why it matters to you right now, today. Here's what no one ever says. Tesla didn't just lose. He was destroyed systematically, deliberately, by people with more money and more power than him, while the rest of the world watched and did nothing. And the most disturbing part? The same system that destroyed him is still in operation today. Same mechanisms, same incentives, different names. So this isn't just a historical video about a deceased scientist. It's about understanding how the world really works, who gets to keep their ideas, who gets erased, and why. Stay with me, because in the end, you will see something that you will truly never forget. Before we go into Tesla's story, I want you to do something. Look around wherever you are right now. Every light in this room, every socket in that wall, every device charging on your desk. That's AC electricity, alternating current, the system that powers the entire modern world. Tesla invented it. Not partially, not conceptually. He built it, tested it, proved it worked, and then watched someone else take credit for the era it created. Now here's the counterintuitive thing I promised you at the start. Tesla wasn't destroyed because he was weak. He wasn't ignored because his ideas were crazy. He wasn't forgotten because he was unimportant. He was destroyed precisely because he was too important. Because what he was building, if it had been allowed to be completed, would have made the people who controlled energy, money, and infrastructure in the early 1900s completely irrelevant. That is a very different story from the one you were told. And it starts not in a laboratory, but in a small village in Serbia in 1856, with a mother who never went to school but could recite entire books from memory. Nikola Tesla was born on July 10, 1856, in Smiljan, a small village in what is now Croatia, then part of the Austrian Empire. His father, Milutin, was a Serbian Orthodox priest. Intellectual, disciplined. He wanted Nikola to follow him into the church. His mother, Georgina Duka, never received a single day of formal education, but she memorized entire Serbian epic poems. She invented her own household tools. She could calculate complex problems in her head faster than most educated men of her time. Tesla later said, "Everything I am, I got from my mother." As a child, Tesla experienced things that today would likely be studied by neurologists. Intense visual hallucinations, not dark ones, but vivid, detailed images that appeared involuntarily whenever he heard a word or concept. He could see inventions fully formed in his mind before drawing a single line on paper. He described it as both a gift and a torment. At 17, he survived cholera, so severely that his father finally agreed to let him study engineering instead of theology, believing Nikola might not live long enough to matter either way. He studied at the Graz University of Technology in Austria. His professors were stunned by his ability. One wrote that Tesla's mathematical intuition was unlike anything he had encountered in 30 years of teaching. But here is the first thing history quietly skips. Tesla never completed his degree. He fell into gambling, lost everything his family sent him, became so ashamed he cut off all contact with his family and disappeared for almost 2 years. The man who would change the world first had to completely fall apart. We'll come back to what pulled him out of that collapse in a moment, because it directly connects to the invention that J.P. Morgan would later pay to destroy. But first, in June 1884, Tesla arrived in New York City. He had 4 cents, a book of his own poems, a letter of recommendation, and a mind that had already, in theory, solved problems that the greatest engineers in America were still struggling with. The letter was addressed to Thomas Edison. It read, in part, "I know 2 great men. One is you, the other is this young man." Edison hired him immediately, and this is where the story gets uncomfortable, because Edison was not the villain he's often made out to be in Tesla memes. He was something more complicated than that. Edison was brilliant, relentless, a genuinely great innovator who built systems, teams, and infrastructure that changed the world. He was also deeply pragmatic, almost brutally so. He believed in what worked, what was profitable, and what he could control. Tesla believed in what was possible. Those two things were always going to collide. Edison's system, DC electricity, direct current, worked. It powered Lower Manhattan. It was his invention, his infrastructure, his identity. Tesla came to him with something better. AC electricity, alternating current, that could travel hundreds of miles without losing power, that could scale to power entire cities, entire countries. Edison's response was not scientific. It was territorial. He promised Tesla $50,000 to fix and improve the DC system. Tesla worked 20-hour days for nearly a year, solved every problem Edison put in front of him. Then Tesla asked for the money. Edison told him he didn't understand American humor. There was no money. There was never going to be any money. Tesla resigned immediately. What happened next is one of the most ruthless corporate warfare campaigns in the history of technology. Edison didn't just compete with Tesla. He launched what became known as the War of Currents. And some of what he did to win it is so dark that most history books still don't include it in full. We're going to cover all of it. But I need to give you one more piece of context first. After leaving Edison, Tesla spent a humiliating period doing manual labor, digging ditches in New York City, unable to find investors or lab space. A foreman at the construction site recognized his accent and heard him talking about electricity, connected him to investors. Tesla finally got a small laboratory, and within 18 months, he had developed, tested, and patented the complete AC electrical system. Motor, generator, transformer, the entire architecture of modern power. George Westinghouse bought the patents, and the war began. Edison's response was systematic and calculated. He began a public campaign to convince America that AC electricity was deadly. He wrote letters to newspapers. He gave public demonstrations, electrocuting dogs, calves, and horses using AC current while journalists watched and wrote horrified reports. He called it being Westinghoused. He lobbied for AC to be used in the electric chair, the newly invented execution device, specifically to associate Tesla's technology with death in the public mind. This wasn't science. This was a war for market dominance fought with propaganda and animal executions. And for a period, it almost worked. Until 1893, the Chicago World's Fair. The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago was the largest event in American history at that point. Over 27 million people attended. Westinghouse and Tesla won the contract to light it, using AC electricity. On the opening night, 100,000 light bulbs powered by Tesla's system turned on simultaneously. People who were there described it as seeing daylight for the first time at night. Edison had refused to allow his light bulb patents to be used, so Tesla and Westinghouse engineered an entirely new bulb design in weeks just to fulfill the contract. The War of Currents was effectively over. 2 years later, Tesla's system powered Niagara Falls, sending electricity to Buffalo, New York, over 20 miles away. The world's first long-distance AC power transmission. Every engineer on the planet understood what this meant. Tesla had won. His system would power the modern world. And that's exactly when he made the decision that sealed his fate. He walked into George Westinghouse's office and tore up his royalty contract. Westinghouse was struggling financially from the legal battles of the War of Currents. Tesla was owed royalties that would eventually have been worth, by today's estimates, somewhere between $12 billion and $60 billion. He tore the contract in half, said Westinghouse had believed in him when no one else would. That was worth more than money. It was one of the most extraordinary acts of loyalty in the history of business. It also left Tesla, eventually, with almost nothing, because what he did next required money, and he had just given away the one thing that would have guaranteed it. What Tesla built next, the project that consumed the last profitable years of his life, is the part of this story that most documentaries spend about 90 seconds on. We're going to spend considerably more than that, because what happened to that project and why is the most important part of this entire story. In 1899, Tesla traveled to Colorado Springs and built a private laboratory. What he did there has never been fully replicated. He generated artificial lightning bolts over 30 meters long. He lit 200 light bulbs wirelessly from 25 miles away. He claimed to have received signals he believed were not terrestrial in origin, a claim he made publicly and was immediately ridiculed for. Whether that last claim was accurate or not, the first two were witnessed and documented. Wireless power transmission. In 1899, Tesla came back to New York with one goal: build a tower that could transmit electricity to the entire world, without wires, without cost to the end user. A global wireless power system. He called it Wardenclyffe. He convinced J.P. Morgan, the most powerful banker in American history, to fund it. Morgan gave him $150,000. Construction began on Long Island in 1901. The tower rose to 60 meters. The underground shaft went 36 meters into the earth. Tesla's design was unlike anything that had been built before or since. And then Morgan asked the question that ended everything. Where do we put the meter? Tesla didn't understand the question at first. Then he did. Morgan wasn't asking how they would charge for the electricity. He was asking how anyone would charge for it at all. If power was broadcast freely through the earth and atmosphere, like radio signals, anyone with a receiver could access it. There was no business model. There was no way to monetize free energy. Morgan pulled his funding. Then, using his extraordinary influence over American banking, he made sure no other investor would touch Tesla or Wardenclyffe. Construction stopped. Tesla spent years trying to find alternative funding. He sold assets, borrowed money, fell into debt. In 1917, the U.S. government demolished the Wardenclyffe Tower, claiming it could be used by German spies to send signals. Tesla was not compensated. He never recovered financially. Here's what makes this genuinely difficult to sit with. In 2009, a group of Serbian scientists conducted new analysis of Tesla's Wardenclyffe designs. Their conclusion: the system was theoretically viable. The physics worked. It may have actually functioned. And in 2014, MIT and a team in Japan independently demonstrated wireless power transmission using principles Tesla had outlined over a century earlier. The question was never whether it was possible. The question was always who it was possible for. Tesla spent his final years in room 3327 of the Hotel New Yorker. He survived largely on warm milk and honey. He had developed an intense relationship with the pigeons of New York City, feeding them daily, caring for injured ones in his room. He said one pigeon in particular, a white female, he loved as a man loves a woman. He had no money. The hotel allowed him to stay, partially out of reverence, partially because Westinghouse Electric quietly covered his bills. On January 7, 1943, a hotel maid found him dead in his room. He was 86 years old. 2 days later, agents from the FBI's Office of Alien Property arrived at the hotel. They seized everything. Every document, every notebook, every piece of equipment, every research file in the room. Tesla was an American citizen. The Office of Alien Property had no legal jurisdiction over his belongings. This has never been satisfactorily explained. Most of what was seized was eventually transferred to the Tesla Museum in Belgrade, which Tesla's nephew Sava Kasanovic fought for years to recover. But a significant portion of the documents, particularly those related to his later research, were classified. Some remain classified today. John G. Trump, a prominent MIT physicist and the uncle of Donald Trump, was brought in to review the seized materials. His official report concluded that Tesla's later work contained nothing of value to national security or science. 30 years later, it emerged that the U.S. military had been actively researching directed energy weapons, weapons whose theoretical basis bore significant resemblance to Tesla's later unpublished work. Make of that what you will. Here's what I want you to actually take from this. Tesla's story is not just about one man who was treated unfairly 100 years ago. It's a case study in how systems deal with ideas that threaten them, how money shapes what gets built and what gets buried, how the version of history you were taught was curated by the people who had the most to gain from one particular version of events. That's why this channel exists. Not to give you conspiracy theories. Not to give you heroes and villains. To give you the full story, with the parts that were left out, so you can decide for yourself what it means. Tesla was just the beginning. Next, we're going inside the story of Alan Turing, the man who won World War II and was chemically destroyed by his own government for who he loved. That video goes places the imitation game film didn't have the budget or the courage to go. If you want to see that, subscribe. Turn on notifications. Not because I'm asking you to support the channel, but because the next story is one you genuinely need to hear. And I'll see you there.